time of year to talk about college wrestling. I mean, it's always a great time to talk college wrestling, especially when the season's going on. But right now, post-conference tournament, NCAA tournament gets underway. Like, it's the perfect time to talk about college wrestling. And if we're going to talk about Big 12 wrestling, you know who we're going to bring on. It is Lee Cothran. He is half of the Ten12 podcast, the Ten12 Network's Big 12 wrestling show, which again, Ten12. It's the best wrestling podcast name anybody has out there. It worked perfectly. Lee, welcome back, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Really, it's the best time of year, right? It's March Madness for us wrestling fans. And, hey,
that's good.
We love brackets. We get 10 brackets with 33 wrestlers in each of them. So, I mean, hey, that's a lot, almost 3x the size of the basketball tournament. So, we'll take it, man. It's a great time of year, and that's what we're in the thick of right now. Is the brackets were released Wednesday the 12th. It's Thursday the 13th, and it is thick in it. Who's got good roads to the finals? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Who's going to get upset? It's the best time of year.
And we're going to talk about all of that. The Big 12 is sending 71 wrestlers to the NCAA championships. That'll be in Philadelphia this year across 13 different schools. And of course, for those who maybe don't know, Big 12 has affiliate schools from other conferences that you would think of in football or basketball that are part of the Big 12, namely North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Northern Iowa, which are and those are a few teams we'll be talking about a bit here. Before we dive into the NCAAs, we got to talk a little bit back about the Big 12 tournament, which just wrapped last weekend. Oklahoma State, nail biter drama, hanging on for their first title in a few years. It came down to the final match to decide if Oklahoma State was going to win it or if Northern Iowa was going to take home a Big 12 title. Absolutely dramatic stuff from Wyatt Hendrickson winning the heavyweight match there. Just absolutely awesome. It was interesting to me because Oklahoma State had this like massive lead after the first few rounds, and then you just watched UNI chip away. I mean, in your opinion, watching everything go down this past weekend, like is that kind of what you expected? Was it surprising to see UNI and OSU be as close as they were? Was it surprising to see Oklahoma State win? I know they've been dominant this year. There's a lot of talk about David Taylor and this team, but like what were your kind of takeaways now that tournament has wrapped up?
Yeah, UNI is fantastic. And I've been screaming that from the rooftop for a few years now, but this year especially. When the Oklahoma State UNI duel was upcoming, I put out there, I think Northern Iowa was the toughest duel matchup for Oklahoma State this season. And based off of the weights, based off of the matchups, the strength versus strength, where they're strong, Oklahoma State is strong. The Iowa duel, on the other hand, where Iowa was strongest, Oklahoma State was weaker. Where Oklahoma State was stronger, Iowa was weaker. And Iowa pulled an upset at 184 pounds to win the duel. So UNI was a lot closer and Oklahoma State ended up just coming out on top with bonus points from 165 to heavyweight, which is kind of how it's gone for Oklahoma State all season. They're really, really strong in the upper weights. But in the tournament setting, it's funny. We joke a lot on the Pin 12 podcast and then on the Dynasty Defined podcast as well that I'm a bit of a Jim Cramer of college wrestling. If you keep up with the financial markets, you always do the opposite of what Jim Cramer says. If you're into NFTs at all, make sure to go throw a little bit of money in the reverse Cramer. I think I'm up like 18% over the past 2 years. So better than the S&P 500. That's not financial advice. I have to say that, but the reverse Cramer. And again, maybe because I have that Jim Cramer effect, maybe you should do the opposite of what I say. But I got a little bit excited early in the tournament, and I put out there, or I didn't put it out there, but I've texted a few people with Ryder Downey, who's the UNI 157 pounder. He was the 3 seed. He lost early. And Julian Farber, their 133 pounder, he was also the 3 seed and lost early. I thought, hey, great. We got a good chance here. Oklahoma State should be able to run away with this. and that was on Saturday afternoon. And then, yeah, like you said, UNI performed extremely well in wrestlebacks. Ryder Downey and Julian Farber both ended up taking third place in the tournament, and got bonus points along the way there. A couple of UNI's champions wrestled really well. They had 4 finalists, and Oklahoma State had 6 finalists. And then on Championship Sunday in that round, Oklahoma State unfortunately just went 1-6. Unfortunately for me, an Oklahoma State fan. And UNI was just getting closer and closer and closer. At 149 pounds, the Iowa State wrestler, Paniro Johnson, beat the UNI wrestler. And then at heavyweight, Wyatt Hendrickson sealed the deal for the Cowboys against the Arizona State wrestler, Colton Schultz, and got it done. But man, oh man, it was close, and that's great. I mean, UNI, seriously, their head coach, Doug Schwab, and their head assistant coach, Lee Roper, are probably the best wrestling coaches in the country from a pure talent development perspective. And they go get unheralded guys like Parker Keckeisen, who's now a 5-time Big 12 champion and national champion as well. Get him out of Wisconsin, and he stays there, and he's incredible. Ryder Downey, who I mentioned, was an unheralded recruit. He was in the round of 12 last year. He's expected to All-American this year. Cale Happel's a 141-pounder that won the Big 12 championship this year. Just, they do fantastic things at Northern Iowa, and they deserve all the praise in the world. And quite frankly, had they won the tournament, I probably would have been just as happy for them as I am for Oklahoma State.
I mean, it's wild. You made the comment, like, if you gave them money, like, just imagine what they could do at UNI, and that is, that sums up a lot of things. Like, it's not an insult against Oklahoma State. It's not an insult against Penn State or anybody else. It's just like they're really good, and they're doing it with way less than anybody else has.
UNI doesn't have a wrestling room. They have to lease space from a local club there in Cedar Falls. Like, they tore down their gym last year. The building got condemned. So that tells you kind of the situation, right? So I know that their head coach Schwab hates talking about it and hates that people say they're punching above their weight, blah, blah, blah. He thinks that they're just as good as anybody else, which they are. But, like, yeah, if you had a nice facility, if you had a little bit more comfortable travel situation, if you had some of the creature comforts that your Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Penn State, Michigan has, then, I mean, they'd probably be winning national championships, quite frankly.
All right. So whoever wants to invest in UNI and be their savior and watch them have even more success, get your checkbook out, have some fun. Okay, so let's talk about UNI being of the 71 Big 12 wrestlers who are going to be competing in the nationals this year. UNI leads the Big 12 with 10. Oklahoma State and South Dakota State both have 9, and Iowa State has 8. Looking at the Big 12, because that's who we're going to focus on. We all look. Penn State has dominated this thing for a while now. They have great staff. They have the resources beyond anyone else to be able to consistently produce this incredible program. They are the behemoth of the sport. That's a big reason why Oklahoma State kind of did what it did post John Smith, of going out and hiring David Taylor and finding people who wanted to invest in Oklahoma State wrestling to help try and get them back on par with Penn State. It's hard not to look at this year and be like, I don't know how you don't pick Penn State to just do it again. It's a little bit, like, okay, cool. Looking around the rest of Big 12, though, that second place down, like, how do you see the Big 12 schools performing in the NCAA tournament this year? Is there anyone else you think can actually, reach the platform, reach the top 3?
No, I don't think that any of the Big 12 schools beyond Oklahoma State and Northern Iowa can make it into the top 3. And a lot of that is because first place is foregone. It's going to be Penn State, and they are going to run away with it. Really, the whole tournament is for second place. The second place team is the national champion, in my opinion, in this tournament this year, because Penn State's just far and away better than everybody else. And that sucks, but It just is the reality. I don't want that to take away from the interest of people watching next week, right?
Yeah.
Because it is an individual sport and anything can happen at any moment, right? And again, I've said this 5 times on your podcast at least. This is the Friday evening is the best event in all of sports at the NCAA Wrestling Championship. That said, there are 7 or 8 schools. I was looking at the seed. If everybody wrestles to seed, which is never how it works, but if everybody wrestles to seed, the spread between second and like 12th place is like 8-9 points. So it's super competitive from second to 10th to 15th, right? Heck, they're not a Big 12 school, but they're in our footprint. Little Rock is a team that very well could have 3 All-Americans and a national champion this year. Northern
Little Rock,
Iowa.
by the way, Little Rock is in the Pac-12, everyone. So if you saw the
Yes.
tweets, Little Rock wins the Pac-12 Wrestling Championship. Yeah, yeah.
And then meanwhile, Arizona State and Cal Baptist are in the Big 12. You know, it's wrestling's just as wonky as everything else.
Yes, at this point, yeah.
Stanford is in the Atlantic Coastal Conference for for wrestling, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, seeing Stanford and Cal in the ACC basketball tournament was like, traditional ACC matchup, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I have SMU basketball season tickets because my Duke the Duke ticket sold and they paid for the whole season. But again, don't take my financial advice. UNI, of course, I think they have a good chance at going and getting a team trophy. Oklahoma State, of course, does as well. South Dakota State very well could be a top 7 team with 9 qualifiers, with a couple of guys who very well could end up in the semifinals. They're wrestling really, really well. Iowa State is always dangerous. They've got a couple of guys that are really good. Arizona State has 2 wrestlers that could easily be in the finals, and Richie Figueroa, who was the national champion at 125 pounds last year, and Colton Schultz, who has been a perennial presence on the podium for heavyweight. The guy cuts to 285 pounds and is really light on his feet somehow. Freak athlete. So, every team has good storylines. Northern Colorado is one that they've got a 141 pounder who won a national championship 2 years ago, took an Olympic red shirt last year, and is back in the field this season at 141 pounds. And he lost to Oklahoma State's Tegan Jameson in the semifinals of the Big 12 tournament. But he's a guy who can definitely go win a national title. He's very, very talented. And then they have a 125 pounder who's really solid, Steve O'Poulin. He could be an All-American. And then their 2 big, and I still haven't talked about their 2 Big 12 champions, Dom Serrano and Vinny Zerban at 133 and 157 pounds respectively, who are absolutely threats to go get on the podium as well. If Northern Colorado has 4 All-Americans, that is a really impressive. It's usually good enough, depending on bonus points and how some of the other guys do. It's usually good enough to get you into the top 10, 12 of the tournament.
What is, and this is always different for every team, but what does success look like for Oklahoma State this year?
Oklahoma State's in a bit of an interesting situation with the transition to the new coach. So you've got 5 wrestlers who you can pretty well rely on to get on the podium this season, which is a big improvement over the past 5 years or so for Oklahoma State, which pains me to say because, I always come in with high hopes for the Cowboys. But you've got Troy Spratley at 125 pounds, Cam Amin at 165 pounds, who transferred from Michigan. He's a 3-time All-American. Dean Hamady at 174 pounds, who transferred from Wisconsin. He's a 2-time All-American. And Dustin Plott, who is your returning national runner-up, and Wyatt Hendrickson, who's your heavyweight, who transferred from Air Force, 2-time All-American, the man who's having the most fun in college wrestling right now because he's free of all the things he had to do at the Air Force Academy. At Oklahoma State, he's working on his MBA. He's still he's a commander in the Air Force ROTC on campus. He goes and walks puppies at the Humane Society every day. The man is an enigma. I could spend a lot of time on White Hendrickson, but those 5, you're very confident you're going to get an All-American out of them. 3 of them are transfers, and technically Troy Spratley transferred before he was at Minnesota his first year, his redshirt season, then transferred to Oklahoma State. So you're wondering, okay, great, like those guys are all really good. A season with David, an off season and a season with the new coaching staff. Did they all improve their position? Did they all get better? Did Troy Spratley make the podium? Does Dustin Plott make it back to the finals? Does Dean Hamity make it to the finals? Does White Hendrickson make it to the finals? Does Cam Amin improve upon his finish from last season? I think he actually wasn't an All-American last year for the first time in his career. Then you have the other 5 wrestlers. You've got the other 4 wrestlers that qualified. 133-pounder didn't qualify. You've got Tegan Jamison at 141. Teague Travis at 149, Caleb Fish at 57, and Luke Serber at 197. Now, Caleb Fish is a transfer. The other 3 have been at Oklahoma State for a little while. How can you improve those guys enough to get onto the podium? Now, as mentioned, Tegan Jamison just beat a national champion last weekend. He got an 8 seed. Actually, all of them got an 8 seed. Fish got a 12 seed. How can you get Tegan Jamison, Teague Travis actually is the 33 seed, Caleb Fish, and Luke Serber onto the podium? If you can get any combo of those 4 onto the podium, I think that's a really successful season. So if you have 6 to 8 All-Americans, and then if you can get Hamity, Hendrickson, Plott, Spratley into the finals, then, and quite frankly, with some of those guys, with what they have in front of them, if you can just be competitive to get to the finals and in the semifinals, and have a lot to cheer for on Friday and Saturday, then it's a really great season. And that's going to be good enough to take 2nd or 3rd place and get a team trophy. The team result's less important, I think. And if you can get that 6 to 8 All-Americans and a couple of finalists, it's an excellent proof of concept for recruiting. So now you can go out and say, hey, look what we did in one off season, right? And they're already gangbusters doing really well in recruiting. They got the number 1 and number 3 recruits in the class of 2026 committed. They've got 3 top 12 guys in the class of 2025 signed, whatever. So how do you go out and say, well, look, Tegan Jamison, Luke Serber, Caleb Fish, they weren't blue chip recruits. They came to Oklahoma State and they got an opportunity and they took advantage of it, and we got them on the podium. We developed them enough to get them on the podium. Okay. Guess what? You're the number 12 recruit in your class and you're number 1 in your weight. If you come to Oklahoma State, we're going to help you maintain that level and then go win national championships and then go make Olympic teams, which is what these guys are thinking about. That's who they're recruiting, is guys who want to be Olympians. So I think really you're establishing your proof of concept on how good can we make wrestlers at Oklahoma State. And I think that's what shows success, is how well they establish that. I think from a fan perspective, there's a lot of grumbling on Sunday night about the going 1-6 in the finals. Okay, yeah, it's not fun to watch 5 of your guys lose, right? But you also look at it as Dustin Plott wrestled Parker Keckheisen than he ever has, better than he ever has. He controlled pace. He held center. He got to his legs a couple times. Couldn't finish, but he kept it close, and that's saying something because Keckheisen's measured him like 5 out of the 7 times they've wrestled. Dean Hamady wrestled Keegan O'Toole in what was probably one of the best wrestling matches I've seen in the past 10 years. I highly recommend you go watch that. Dean Hamady, Keegan O'Toole, Big 12 Finals. Keegan O'Toole's a 2-time national champion. Dean Hamady is one of maybe like 6 people that's taken down Keegan O'Toole in the last 5 years. And, that was just a fantastic match. And Keegan O'Toole is an extremely smart wrestler. But Hamady had him. If he had been willing to take a stalling penalty with 20 seconds left in the third period, he wins that match. Just all these guys wrestled really well. And as David Taylor said, we're not really here to win Big 12 titles. Like, it's nice, but this is data points. We're collecting data points, and we're going to take these and get better for the national tournament. And let's see how they do.
The Big 12 has 7 wrestlers as top 4 seeds across various weights. At 149, it's Pinero Johnson of Iowa State as a 4 seed. 165 has Peyton Hall of West Virginia as a 2. 174 has Keegan O'Toole. 174 has Keegan O'Toole, Missouri as a 1, and Dean Hamady as a 3. 184 has Parker Keckheisen, as you mentioned, of UNI as a 2, Dustin Plott as a 4 from Oklahoma State, and then at 285, Wyatt Hendrickson of Oklahoma State as a 2 seed. Looking at these guys in particular, rank them 1, 2, 3. Who's got the best chance to win their weight class this year?
I think that Parker Keckheisen's 1 as having the best chance. He's the returning national champion. He will get the winner of the number 1 seed, Carter Starachi of Penn State, who is a 4-time national champion, and Dustin Plott. Carter Starachi and Dustin Plott is a much different matchup than Parker Keckheisen and Dustin Plott. I think Plott has a much better chance at beating Starachi than he does of beating Keckheisen. So I'd rank Keckheisen number 1. I think that I would rank Peyton Hall as number 2, potentially, from West Virginia. Mitch Messenbrink is the 1 seed at 165, and he is a fantastic wrestler. So it's hard to make that prediction, but I think that that's probably the best place to place that bet. Then maybe Wyatt Hendrickson, which again, another one, that's kind of homer picky because Gable Steveson exists, and he's probably one of the greatest college wrestlers of all time at heavyweight. And then I'd probably say Pinero Johnson, and then Dustin Plott. I don't really give. Actually, I'm going to flip that around. I'm going to give Dustin Plott the 4 and Pinero Johnson the 5, just because I think the guy with the best chance at winning the national championship I think the best odds actually is the 5 seed at 125, Richie Figueroa, who's the returning national champion, and his draw to the finals is very competitive. So I think that it's going to be a really good chance for him, and I think he's mad from his first match loss in the Big 12 championship. So I think he's got a really good chance, and then I think that at 141, Andrew Alirez and Cale Happel and Tegan Jameson are all 3 going to be really, really successful this season. And then, of course, I totally miss Keegan O'Toole and Dean Hamady. Quite frankly, I think actually now that I'm sorry there.
It's okay.
But I think O'Toole and Hamady actually are going to bump up to 1 and 2 for me. But and then Keckheisen. So
okay.
Hamady and O'Toole. I'd go O'Toole and then Hamady and then Keckheisen.
Okay.
I think that's the finals. I think that Hamity and O'Toole is the finals. And I really, really hope that's the case, because that is just fantastic textbook wrestling. Seriously, just to learn a little bit more about wrestling, if you're looking to get into it, go watch that match, and especially watch the takedown that O'Toole executes in sudden victory. It is just incredible high level chain wrestling from an extremely smart wrestler in O'Toole, and Hamity is right there with him in that regard, as being great at creating action when you're in precarious situations.
Lee, as always, this is incredible. We could go on for a very long time. And you and I know that when you and I sit down on a Zoom or call, like we end up going like, we'll record for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll chat for another 2 hours about all sorts of Oklahoma State things. So we'll wrap this up before we end up at an hour and a half long interview. Lee, for everybody who's watching this, obviously you're probably a Big 12 wrestling fan. So if you are not listening to the Ten12 podcast, PIN12, go do so. It's available all over the place. Everywhere podcasts are available. Lee also does the Dynasty Defined podcast, which is an Oklahoma State wrestling podcast. Absolutely incredible stuff you're doing there, man. Love having you in the network. Love having a Big 12 wrestling show. It's just so fun, like to me as a Big 12 nut, to be like, we have a wrestling podcast. What's your network got? Well, yeah, football. Yeah, to 8 football shows. Great, cool, awesome. So Lee, as always, it's an absolute,
man.
You guys do such a great job. You really do.
Yeah.
You got a passion for it. You got the knowledge about it. You got like it's good stuff.
For sure. I'm working on getting more experts in. So like on Dynasty Defined, I've got Dayton Fix doing it with me now. He's a 5-time Big 12 champion, world silver medalist, right? So like he's I want to bring y'all as much technical knowledge as possible and learn about the sport. We want to help it grow. That's the important thing. We need more fans.
Dayton Fix is a co-host. That is see, Lee's rubbing shoulders with some big wigs here. Okay, you're doing good, man. All right, man. Appreciate it.
I've been pretty lucky. So awesome. Thanks, Phillip. Appreciate you.